Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition. This week it comes from Daniel Blackham, Deputy US Sports Editor for Reach PLC, but more importantly, a Brentford fan and a familiar face on the podcast as well. Daniel, welcome back. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Thank you very much. Yeah, good to be here. Looking forward to tomorrow's game, though probably not as much as you are.
Yeah, well, we are certainly looking forward to it. Hopefully the cup will be paraded on the pitch beforehand and it'll create a brilliant atmosphere for Newcastle United to hopefully beat Brentford and continue their march towards European football for next season. I mean, that's where we'll start. What are you expecting from Newcastle, do you think, on Wednesday? Are you hoping there'll be a bit of a hangover from the celebrations over the last fortnight?
I'm not just hoping for a bit of a hangover. I'm hoping that multiple players are still physically hungover in order for Brentford to get anything out of it. Because, as you said, the atmosphere is going to be incredible. I saw the footage from the parade and the celebration the other night. So the players are all going to be riding high. The supporters, I mean, you know what it's like at St James's Park anyway. So it's always a difficult away game. Wednesday will basically be what Newcastle allow it to be. It will basically be, either they do take their foot off the gas in sort of the shadow of the cup win, or that's the springboard for the rest of the season. And I think that what Brentford will bring is the same as always when it comes to an away game in Newcastle. A lot of respect for Newcastle, which is putting men behind the ball, not exactly playing too much on the front foot. It's going to be, as I say, it's going to be exactly whatever Newcastle want it to be, essentially, on Wednesday.
I think it's a really big challenge for Newcastle United. Brentford's not one of the teams I would have picked to have faced if you're trying to avoid this hangover from the cup. But hopefully Eddie Howe's got the message out there, that there is business to be done. Of course, Newcastle looking for the Champions League, but Brentford themselves as well going for European football. And that's going to have to really be the carrot that they're looking to get onto, isn't it? That the fact that European football is still very much on the table for the Bees.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's been a really weird run of games for Brentford. I mean, you look at the last few results, and they've had some strong results, winning 4-0 away at Leicester. That was an impressive win. And then the Bournemouth win was a bit of a surprise because they didn't play especially well. I think that, in the first sort of half an hour, everyone thought, oh, here we go again. It's, looking at quite a comfortable defeat here. And then it was the ultimate smash and grab. But then you offset those against, the defeat against Aston Villa was just a really disappointing performance. It wasn't just a disappointing to lose at home. It was just a disappointing performance against a poor Villa side at the time. And a draw at home to Everton as well it's those type of results that if you're going to go for European football, which obviously Newcastle are, if Brentford are going to be going for European football, those defeats have to turn into at least, the defeat to Villa has to be a draw, and the draw to Everton has to be a win, really. I can see anything happening in the rest of the season. I can see them, going on a little bit of a run and pushing towards the European Conference League places and that sort of thing. But I think it's more likely that they sort of not struggle to the finish, but I wouldn't expect too much, to be perfectly honest. I think that a lot of it is going to be, a lot of the excitement for Brentford fans is going to be injured players returning towards the end of the season and the next coming weeks. And Wednesday's game, if Brentford do go and win away at St James's Park, then you really are saying, okay, European football is on the cards. But a defeat there, and then there's tough games coming up. There's, the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, Brighton coming up. Those games then look a lot nastier if you lose on Wednesday night. So yeah.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because you could remove the reference to Brentford in the point you just made and apply it to any one of the teams chasing that kind of fifth position down to where you guys are sitting. I think it's a 10th or 11th, because there seems to be no one wanting to really seize the initiative. Teams are putting together little bits of runs of good form and then tailing off and having daft results against teams they should be beating on paper. And Newcastle United have been doing the same in recent weeks as well after that fantastic 9 winning run. Then the inconsistencies have sneaked back in, but one win can really change the course of the season. In terms of how Brentford are going to approach this game, what do we expect from them? Are they going to be sitting back and trying to absorb Newcastle and inviting them on, or are they going to try and take control of it?
I would imagine there is going to be quite a lot of sitting back. And again, it depends on, a lot of it depends on how Newcastle play as well, because if Brentford can sense that, Newcastle are sort of struggling they're not exactly playing the same type of passing football and they're just a little bit slow and sluggish, then I think Thomas Frank would would seize the initiative and tell his players to go for it. But if it is just, how Newcastle have been for much of the season and against Brentford both times, then I would imagine that it's going to be the case of sitting behind the ball, especially away from home. Thomas Frank likes doing that, likes sitting behind the ball, attack when you have the ball, and sort of use those 10-minute spells to your advantage and really go for it in 10-minute spells, but then learn to play without the ball and that sort of thing. To be honest, a lot of it was a lot of what I was going to say was thrown up in the air by the B team announcement today, which is that Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey, who are Brentford's 2 fullbacks, they're on the verge of returning to first team football. There was a suggestion it was going to be for Wednesday night, in which case that would have been huge, and that completely changes how Brentford play. They're both playing for the B team today, so they definitely won't be involved on Wednesday, which means you're looking at Lewis Potter left back. Right back's a bit more of a difficult one because they've signed this lad from Fiorentina, Code, and he looks really good, but he's suffered with an injury as well. So it's then, do you play Christopher Raya at right back? It'll be quite a defensive team, as it were, especially in the middle of midfield. It's then Mikkel Damsgaard will be asked to do a lot with a little because he'll play as the only sort of attacking midfielder out of the 3, with the 2 Janelton, Norgard sort of sitting a little bit further back. The front 3 sort of speaks for itself. Kevin Schade, Bryan Mbeumo, Johan Wissa. They can cause any defence in the league problems, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they do on Wednesday. But it's going to be a lot is asked of that front 4, I think, because of the limited time that they'll get on the ball and the limited time that Brentford are spending attacking, as it were.
But they can move the ball at pace, and I think that's what Newcastle United have really got to watch out for. I still don't think they're overly comfortable at having to be the dominating side in games. I think they do like it when they can sit back themselves and then hit teams on the counter. We saw little bits of that in the Carabao Cup final, and it worked really, really well. But good teams have to dominate games, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens on Wednesday. You mentioned there the midfield of Brentford, and Christian Norgard has signed a new deal, so he'll be coming into this game on a high.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that when you look at Brentford's team, there's probably a little bit of work that needs to be doing in the summer. There's probably a few positions that you think, probably need to strengthen there, and the big one is the middle of midfield. But having Christian Norgard signing a new contract is huge, because not only because he can continue to start games for the next sort of probably year and a half, 2 years, but he'll also then develop the younger players that are coming through the ranks and that will eventually sort of replace him in the long run. I mean, he's so vital to how Brentford play. He may not be the most exciting player because, he doesn't take men on and do step overs and shoot from range and that sort of thing. He doesn't play long, fancy passes like Matthias Jensen, but he's just so solid in the middle of midfield, which is, as you say, when you do want to win the ball back quickly and then attack quickly when you're sort of on the counter, that's so important to have a man in there who can do that. He's such a key part of how Brentford line up in whatever formation they play. Having him in that little sort of 6 role is crucial.
And the midfield will be key again. If I'm not mistaken, when these 2 played down in Brentford, the midfield battle was easily won by Brentford. Obviously, Newcastle United coming to this in great spirits. We saw in the final Tonali, Joelinton and Bruno really dominate that space, as we know they can do when they're on form. What are you thinking when you went in terms of the battle in midfield? Are you backing the Bees to win it?
I mean, I'd like to think so, because as you say, having Norgard in there is such a difference maker, and especially if Jensen is fit. I'm not sure if he's fit at the moment. I know that there were some suggestions he'd taken a knock. If he plays as well, then that really does transform how the midfield plays. But you look at Newcastle's midfield and Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, Joelinton. Is it those 3 who will be playing in the middle for Newcastle? Those 3. How do you stop them really? When they're on form, there's few teams in the league who will be able to do so. Because Bruno is good on both sides of the ball. Tonali, Sandro Tonali, I love watching him play. I think he's incredible. And again, he's one that it's going up against a midfield 3 like that is where you think Brentford are going to play a lot more defensive and play without the ball because of the threat that they carry. It's not just going up against a team that has 2 good wide players. It's having that strength in midfield that it's going to be a tough game for Brentford's midfield.
And looking at Alexander Isak as well, a man who just cannot stop scoring. He could hit 20 goals if he scores on Wednesday. That would be back-to-back seasons. He's got 20 goals in the Premier League for Newcastle United, which is some feat. I mean, you look at him. What do you think? Do you fear him?
I'm terrified of him. I'm absolutely terrified of him. Yeah, he's one of those players that you put alongside Mo Salah and Erling Haaland, in that when your team plays against them, you dread them getting the ball and you dread them doing something, because you know that it could take Isak, he could play 90 minutes and touch the ball 4 times, but one of those times he'll get the ball and he'll score. He's just that type of player. I know that he does do a lot of work when he gets the ball out wide. He can go at players straight away, but it's just in front of goal. He's terrifying, honestly. I mean, I back Nathan Collins, who's having the season of his life, to deal with him. But it's who plays alongside Nathan Collins. Is it going to be Ethan Pinnock? Is it? I don't think Vandenberg is back yet. And obviously that's a huge miss for Brentford if he's not, because it's such a difference maker when you have 2 big strong centre backs up against a guy like Isak. But yeah, he absolutely terrifies me. I think that Brentford are going to have to play, and again that comes down to that midfield 3 again. I keep going back to it, but having a strong midfield and stopping sort of the access to Isak is going to be so important.
Yeah, but you are right. He could be absent for the majority of the game and all of a sudden just turn it on. And that's what the best players kind of do, don't they? They don't always have to be involved. Just talk to me about Brentford's away form, because I didn't realise until I started looking and researching for this episode that they are top of the form table when it comes to their last 6 away games, 1-5, drawn 1. And if you go, to October, November time off the top of my head, they couldn't win away on the road for love and the money, and it was their home form that was really keeping them in the race for Europe. What's changed?
It quite literally. I mean, I said at the time of our first recording, in that it is just literally chalk and cheese. It's they play well at home, they play badly away. At the time, and I think that is still the case, it's because of the fixtures. You look back at those fixtures that Brentford had at home at the start of the season, and it was teams that you would expect them to win against anyway. It was games that you think, well, they're the overwhelming favourites. They're much stronger than the opposition. It was teams down the bottom of the table. No disrespect to teams like Ipswich, teams like Southampton. It was those types of teams they were coming against. And now it sounds simple, but that away form sort of started with, I think it was the game away at Southampton is where it started, which was the 5-0, I think it was, and it could have been about 12. Honestly, they played so well against Southampton, and then carried that into games again against teams further down the bottom end of the table. Crystal Palace was a really good win. Leicester was another one where they could have hit double figures if they kept going, but they sort of took the foot off the gas and left it at 4. And it's the case of they have literally played teams that you would expect them to beat either home or away, and that's it. So that's why that run is in grave danger on Wednesday, because Newcastle is a team that historically, I don't remember the last time Brentford won away at St James's Park.
Well, I've got the stat for you. I've got it here, and it's not great. Having lost their first ever home league match against Brentford 5-2 in September 1934, Newcastle are now unbeaten in their last 6 against them at St James's Park, winning 5 and drawing 1. So yeah, a little while ago.
Yeah, exactly. So and I mean, Newcastle was always one of those games where Brentford don't really turn up away from home, or where they've been unlucky. I remember the 3-3 draw a couple of seasons ago. Last season they were unlucky because it was the game that Rico Henry. Well, no, it was actually season before. No, it was last season when Rico Henry did his ACL at St James's Park, and that you could tell that sent a ripple through the team at the time. He was such a big part of how they played, and losing him was devastating. So that just made that task so much more difficult. And yeah, Newcastle was a game that the players must dread, because it's such a tough place to go. So yeah, I fear for that run continuing, unfortunately.
It must be so frustrating though, because you look at your home form in the last 6 and you've lost the last 6 games. Like, as a fan, would you rather than win 3, lose 3 on the road, and then win 3 at home and lose? Like, would you rather a mix, or do you want these kind of 2 extremes?
As a fan, I don't really mind it, to be perfectly honest. As a fan, I'd want us to just win every game, obviously. But having seen the types of games that they're playing away from home, it can be a bit frustrating. But at the same time, one of the big things that Brentford had at the start of the season was that whenever they were playing away, they were playing how I fear they're going to play against Newcastle on Wednesday, which is let's keep 10 men behind the ball at all times, and let's attack when we can in sort of 5-minute spells and stuff like that. Grab a late goal if we can, that was how they seemed to play against teams that on some occasions they probably shouldn't have. They probably should have gone for it a little bit more, and that was the frustrating thing. Whereas now that's sort of happening a tiny bit at home, and I fear for that happening at home against teams, like Arsenal and sorry, not Arsenal, but like against teams that are sort of towards the top end of the table. You do fear for that attitude coming in. So it is all an attitude thing with how they approach games. So the fact that, as you say, they played these games away from home where you would back them to win either way. They've afforded to play with a little bit more freedom and get forward a little bit more. But Wednesday is going to be a real sort of. I'm not too sure how they're going to deal with it. But as a fan, you just want to see them go for it in every game, don't you? Really, you want to see them get the ball out wide, get the wingers running at players, get shots off. But at the same time, it's no fun watching that when the other team immediately gets the ball, goes down the other end, and takes advantage of the defense being overrun and scores. So it's you've got to take it every sort of game as it were. So I hope they go for it on Wednesday. But at the same time, I would settle for a 1-0 win if it meant that we had 5% possession.
Yeah. Just a reminder, ladies and gents, this episode is sponsored by NORD VPN. You can hit the link in the podcast description box to take advantage of an exclusive offer for our listeners and viewers of the Everything is Black and White podcast. Your subscription can be used on up to 10 devices, costing to begin with just £2.30 a month. And there's various levels of protection that you can get. Do hit that link, do support the podcast and protect yourself as well. Daniel, talk to us about Bryan Mbeumo then, because I said in the match preview that with John Gibson that I would love to see him in the Newcastle United shirt, and I carried that by saying that I hate doing this because I always complain when Alexander Isak gets linked away, but we're going to talk about him anyway. How good is he, and do you think this is his final season with Brentford? Do you see him moving in the summer?
I mean, I think Bryan Mbeumo is incredible. I dread losing him. I think they will lose him. I think that he'll go this summer because that seems to be the sort of, not the narrative as such, but that just seems to be the general feeling is that this season could be his last. There have been links to some of the top clubs. I know there was a Liverpool link for quite a while, but now that it looks like Mo Salah might be staying at Anfield, that link will probably go away, and then his options really are sort of limited. If Newcastle go for him, that would be the ideal move, I think, because it's a step up, but at the same time, with all due respect to Newcastle, it's not joining PSG or Barcelona, where you're playing Champions League football every week and you're probably not getting in the team and that sort of thing. He would start for Newcastle, I would imagine. Playing in Europe, playing for a team with million fans or whatever, it's a move. That move would be good for him. I would hate to see him go, but at the same time, Newcastle could probably afford to pay the money Brentford would ask. It's going to be a difficult summer because there's a bunch of players who you could see leaving Brentford. You look at Johan Wissa, there was links to Nottingham Forest. Kevin Schade, there was heavy links to Dortmund, and it seemed like that one almost happened. Mikkel Damsgaard has been in the form of his life. I think only Salah has more assists in the Premier League this season than him. So you've got to think that any smart team is looking at him and thinking, why are we not all over this? So there's going to be a few, and it's then the case of, well, how many do Brentford realistically let go this summer? Even if their asking price is met, they're not going to let 4 players leave, especially 4 attacking players. So it's the case of, if Wissa ends up going in the first few weeks of the summer, I would imagine Bryan Mbeumo will stay, because you can't really lose 2 from the same front through in one go. Likewise, if Dortmund come back in for Schade and he says, I want to go, that then closes the door for Mbeumo, at least until next summer. So yeah, I'm keeping everything crossed that he's going to stay. But as I say, I think it'll all come down to which teams are interested. If Newcastle actually firm up an interest, if they are interested, if they actually make a move early, so that Wissa then stays and Schade then stays, and there's no interest in Damsgaard. There's a lot of variables, but he's incredible. He's such a huge part of how Brentford play. He's a leader on the pitch as well as Wissa. I'm terrified of him going, to be perfectly honest.
And the relationship those two have is really, really good as well. I think Mbeumo's got 15 this season, Wissa 14. So they are the main threats for Brentford. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Tino Livramento handles Mbeumo. He's doing brilliantly against Salah and Bowen, and then there's no rest for him because he's going up against arguably the 3rd or 4th best winger in the Premier League. So that's going to be a really interesting battle to watch. In terms of a Wissa, I mean, what do we need to look out for? You know, is it his pace? Is it his, you know, how clinical he is in front of goal? What did Dan Burn and Fabian Schär have to do to stop him?
To be perfectly honest, it's a weird one with Wissa. He's not the fastest player in the world. He's not Kevin Schade. He's not slow. But it's not like, you know, he'll beat a defender for pace every time. He's just a very smart footballer. He rarely gives the ball away. He knows when to hold on to the ball. He knows when to hold it up. He knows when to drop deep. He knows when to run in behind. And as you say, he is clinical in front of goal. So he only needs sort of. I'm not comparing him to Isak and saying they're the same footballer, but like I said about Isak, how he only needs a few chances. That's the same with Wissa. If you give him 3 chances in front of goal, you can bet he's going to score 1. And a lot of the pressure has been on him, especially when teams have played against Bryan Mbeumo, they've been doubling up on him on the wing. So as soon as he gets the ball, there's a man in front of him and a man stopping him cutting inside. That just extremely limits what he can do because he can't take on 2 players every time. But then having that player from the middle pulled out wide, that then frees up a little bit of space for us. And I think that's where he's been able to exploit it. He just seems to be loving life at the moment, and that's why I think Brentford fans at the moment, if you picked one of them that you had to keep, I think some of them would pick Wissa. To be honest, even though Mbeumo's got this huge market value and he's club legend at this point, I think that Wissa is so important. And as you say, the fact that he can play on the wing if he needs to, at the moment he's been shining through the middle. You know, as you say, he only needs sort of 2 or 3 chances to score. He's so clinical. So it's going to be tough for Dan Burn at the back because, as you say, he's a tough one to deal with. He's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, but he just knows where to be at all times. He knows how to get past defenders, and as you say, he's just incredibly smart.
Yeah, it sounds a real threat, and if you watch him, you can see that he's a real threat. How much do you reckon Mbeumo will go for in the summer if indeed he does leave? Are Brentford going to try and hold out for as much as possible?
If you ask me as a fan, then I'm saying he's not going for less than 100. I think that when you compare him to Ivan Toney's situation, Ivan Toney only had a year left on his contract. He very obviously wanted to go, and he wasn't afraid about telling everyone about it. Bryan Mbeumo hasn't done that. He's stayed very loyal. He's kept on putting the effort in. Hasn't given any interviews where he's saying, "Yeah, time for me to move on." I'm not too sure on his contract situation, whether there's any talks over an extension at the moment. I would doubt it. But as you say, he's got enough time left on his contract, and I think that for the player that he is, if Tony went for 40 million, you're looking at double at least. So at least 80. Especially if Southampton won 100 million for that Tyler Dibbling, Brighton's definitely worth 100, 120. I as a fan, I'm saying 100 million. If I was to then look at it from a more objective point of view, 60 is probably a smart investment for a team. But as I say, for my money, 100 million pounds is what he's worth to the team.
Yeah, I mean, 60 million, and I'm sure many Newcastle fans would take that. But you're right; it's so bizarre. Just on an off point, when you hear star players like announce midway through the season that I want to go at the end of the season. We just had Matthias Cunha do it over the weekend. I've made it clear that I need to take the next step. I want to fight for titles and big things. I have potential. It's like, why are you saying that out loud? I mean, I know why you're saying it, because you want other teams to come knocking and say we'll take you, but also from a respect point of view, I just find it very disrespectful. Concentrate on keeping Wolves in the Premier League, and then your agent can make the calls in the background, and Wolves come to an agreement, and you'll be off. You don't need to come out and say it in public. I think it's just a unnecessary distraction. But anyway, that was a bit of a rant about something else. The weak link for Newcastle to exploit.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know who's going to play right back because of the injuries and that sort of thing. So if I had to guess, it would be there. It also sort of semi breaks my heart to say it, but Ethan Pinnock's not really been the same player this season. He's put in a couple of performances where fans have sort of grimaced and gone, "Oh, I think it might be time for him to move on. I think it might be time for Vandenberg to properly take that slot next to Collins." So when you think about that, it's the right hand side of defence, and it's the sort of left centre half, as it were. Those are the two areas which I'm sure, if Alexander Isak's listening, he's going to be delighted, because that's exactly the sort of area he can exploit. That's the area that, but as I say, it depends on who's playing, because Coyote does seem fantastic, and he won the Italian Golden Boy Award for best young Italian player, or best young player in Italy. all the reading on him at the moment is that he's going to be the next big thing. But as you say, if he is still struggling with this injury, if he's not going to play, then that's probably going to be the slot that Newcastle can exploit. The same, unfortunately, again, it breaks my heart to say it because he's a club icon, but Ethan Pinnock has been a bit questionable, let's say, this season.
Yeah, well, there's one for Isak, hopefully to exploit. Daniel, give me your score prediction, and how is this going to go?
As a Brentford fan, my score prediction, I'm gonna say that we're gonna smash and grab again, like we did at Bournemouth, and 2-1 or 2-0. What I would hope for right now, and if it was offered to me, I would take it. I would take a draw right now, because I think that's the more likely scenario. I think possibly the more likely scenario is Newcastle winning, but I don't want to say that. I would never say that. So I'm gonna hope against hope that we can sneak something. But I just say, if you offer me a draw right now, I would definitely take it.
Well, there we go. Daniel, thank you very much for popping on to the Everything is Black and White podcast. To you guys watching and listening, you know what to do by now. Hit thumbs up, get into the comments, leave us a rating and review. Make sure you click on the link in the podcast description box to get an exclusive discount on your NORD VPN plan. And for myself, I will see you later in the week, hopefully celebrating a win for Newcastle United over Brentford.